Have you heard about Gestalt therapy, but are curious as to what it's really about? Maybe you have a bit of an understanding, but you're wanting to get a clearer picture? Well, my name's Debacco, and I've been studying Gestalt therapy the last couple of years. And now I'm setting up my private practice, and I want to help educate around this modality of talk therapy. So, firstly, who am I? I'm a Gestalt psychotherapist, embodiment counselor, mindfulness practitioner. I run and facilitate workshops and retreats, particularly for queer and curious men and the wider queer community. And most importantly, I'm a curious human being. I'm really interested in this moment where your own curiosity lies. Like I mentioned in the intro, maybe you have some understanding of Gestalt therapy, maybe you're coming in completely fresh. I just want you to start to tune into this sense of curiosity within you, because that's a primal foundational quality of Gestalt. Let's start with the pioneers of Gestalt. So, Gestalt therapy really formed in the 1950s with Fritz Perls and Laura Perls, husband and wife couple, along with Paul Goodman. And they created a seminal text in the 50s that was really the birth of Gestalt therapy, drawing a little bit on Eastern philosophy, on somatic principles, and some of the pillars that I'll go into through this presentation. So these are the three heavy hitters of the early days of Gestalt. And one of the best quotes to sum up Fritz Perls' thinking and theory around Gestalt is that it's all about raising awareness, and awareness is in itself healing. Now, I love this image, this little figure walking the razor's edge of that knife. That's really the most alive moment in Gestalt therapy, when therapist and client are making contact with one another. They're skirting that razor's edge, they're meeting, and it's a very relational style of therapy. They're kind of knowing each other through that contact, just edging up to the razor's edge from each side of the knife there. Now, this is the Gestalt hologram, and maybe some of these words are familiar, maybe they seem like another language. I want to try and boil this down into much more easier to digest terms. So, phenomenology, I've crossed that out. Instead of phenomenology, let's think about it in terms of what is observable. So, this might be demonstrated in terms of what a client is doing with their body. It could be body language. It could be what's in the wider field of the space that you're working within. There's a really nice experiment here that can demonstrate this. What's the first thing you read in this constellation of letters? If I bold some of the letters now, maybe it's what you initially read, maybe it's something different. But this demonstrates between these two how we can often interpret, put our own spin on what these letters might read as, whereas a client might have a different way of interpreting it. It's not our job as a Gestalt therapist to interpret the words, but rather point out that there's letters there, and what meaning do you make of those letters? Another interesting example of this is the dress that broke the internet back in 2015. So Twitter went wild. It was called Twitter back then. I'm still getting used to adapting and calling it X, but it really blew up on social media as to whether this dress was black and blue or white and gold. And you might have your own phenomenology, impressions, and interpretations around that. And the New York Times even wrote a whole article around the science of optical perception and how our brains interpret certain tones. You can see from this interesting diagram here, depending on what lens or kind of the way that a camera might interpret certain colors, they can start to blend and become the actual same pigments, no matter if it originated as a black and blue dress or a white and gold dress. In reality, the camera interprets something somewhere in between. Next on our Gestalt hologram, we're going to cross out dialogue and we're going to translate into simply how we communicate. So here we're talking about tone of voice, the certain words and vocabulary that we use. It can even be the speed at which we're talking, if we're leaving room for the other person to come in and share their words with us. It's that kind of dance that can happen in verbal exchange. And thirdly, we cross out field theory, and I like to refer to this in layman's terms as like the context or the vibe. Field theory, I like to look at it as a visual metaphor. You can see all these spindly threads that connect things together, connecting me to you as you watch this presentation that I'm giving. Where there's threads there, there's connections. And also these threads are to do with our own concentric circles. So we have our self right down in the center there, and our wider circle would be family and friends. And then if we move out and extend our field, we're moving more into community, all of humanity on this planet. Then we have Mother Earth, Gaia, the collective consciousness, if that's something that resonates for you. I want to take a little bit of a pause now. I know there's been a bit of an information download going on around this Gestalt theory, the hologram, the pioneers. I just want you to drop into your body. Let's do a little bit of a somatic, curious investigation now. What do you notice? Where is your awareness drawn in your body? For me, I feel a little bit of vibration in the top of my chest here as my vocal cords are warmed up and starting to sing. So my awareness is very drawn up here. I'm curious where your awareness is getting drawn. And that can be often a question that, as a therapist, I regularly check in with my clients around. What are you aware of now? Taking a breath, and let's continue on our journey. A big foundation of Gestalt therapy is the here and the now. It's primarily interested in what is happening between me and you, the in between, here in this very moment. So, in talk therapy, it's very common for a client to discuss something that's happened from their past week or adolescence, childhood. It can be spanning their whole life spectrum. But my role as a Gestalt therapist is to bring it back into the here and now, because that is what's most alive, and that's where awareness can really be heightened and expanded. If I ask the client, and how is it to talk about that with me here and now? See, I'm bringing the here and now back in, and it's bringing the client back into the space here with me, and hopefully giving some useful data about how is it relationally to be talking about that thing right now. Another really key aspect of Gestalt is the self. And there's actually a verb that we learned a bit about in our Gestalt theory training, and that's the concept of selfing. So our self is constantly in flux, and it depends what context we're in, what other person or people that we're making contact or relating with, as to how our self adapts and maybe shows up in those moments. So I bring myself into the therapy room, and the client brings their self, and ourselves are continually selving in therapy. And it's it's really interesting when we bring and raise awareness to that selfing process. Like, how are you showing up now? Or pointing out some patterns that might be repeating themselves in the therapy space with both of ourselves selving. It's a bit of a mouthful. I'm hoping that you're keeping up with me here, but it's really interesting to think about the self as something that is changing, that is in flux all the time. Thirdly, what is experimentation? This is another staple in the Gestalt therapy landscape. A very common, even a little bit passe, we might call it now, is the empty chair experiment, where a client might have some unfinished business with a family member, a friend, someone living or deceased that they might not be able or ready to tend to that unfinished business. So I, as a therapist, could bring in a chair into our relational field and say, put this person or even put this part of yourself on this empty chair and start a dialogue. And I can help facilitate that because, for someone new to that kind of empty chair work, it can be a little bit confronting or feel a little bit clunky. But it's my role as a therapist to help them drop into staying open to that communication and kind of titrating and slowing down that process and letting them speak and listen, both sides of the communication, of the dialogue. Other experimentations can come in all sorts of different forms. It can be around moving the body, moving furniture around the room. It can be drawing boundaries around personal space with some string. There's really no limit to experimentation as long as it has relevance, or it might be enlightening and raise awareness to what the client wants to work on. And always with experimentation, it is an invitation that I'm giving the client. It's not a request, or, well, it's a soft request, but I'm not ordering or making a client do something. It's very important that this is a co-created experience. And fourthly, resourcing is so essential, particularly if a client's feeling activated or there might be some trauma that we're starting to move into. There could be some historical pieces that are sending the nervous system into unrest, or perhaps there's a level of stress that's coming in. So all sorts of beautiful embodied resourcing techniques are what I like to teach and explore with clients. So that can be down-regulating breaths. It can be using some self-touch to, this is called packing, where you kind of squeezing and just checking in with the boundary of the body and coming back into the self. Planting the soles of the feet down on the ground is also a really lovely, easy starting point for some resourcing. It can also look a little bit more advanced, like a guided meditation around creating a safe space that you can go to at any point that you need to. And that's a longer process that I would guide through a gentle meditation. That brings us to the end of my crash course in Gestalt therapy. I hope it's ignited some curiosity in you. I hope it's answered a few questions. If you want to keep in touch with the work that I'm doing, scan that QR code. It'll take you to my links page. And of course, social media is a great place to keep in touch with my offerings, my therapy, and all the different things that I'm getting up to. So at Tobacco Sunsets, my Instagram, tobaccosunset.com, if you'd like to know more about my therapy. And I also offer a free 15-minute consultation if you would like to have a call and understand if working with me would be the right path for you. All right. I hope you got something out of this presentation, and take care. I hope to hear from you soon.